Hello. Thank you so much, excuse me, for joining me for the podcast of the True Power from Within. I do pray each and every day that this podcast touches you in the most amazing and encouraging way. So, today it's going to get real, right? So, I have called this podcast Redeemed for Legacy. And I want to talk about my absolute favorite book in the entire Bible because it's so relatable to my life, right? And my story. But I have always stopped, not really stopped. I've read the whole thing, but like through chapter 1 and 2, and I'm going from the book of Ruth, right? Chapter 1 and 2 is like super juicy, and you like see where Ruth goes from loss and grief, and she travels with her mother-in-law to the town in which she is from, and we see that she's picking up grain. We see all this, right? And then we think of it as a love story, right? We think of it as this amazing like comeback story, right? And so I'm coming out of chapter 3 today because I've had an amazing revelation, right? So I was thinking of going with something completely different today, but God says, no, this is what I want you to go through. This is what I want you to go for. And I was like, okay, here we are. Redeemed for legacy. So we know Ruth, right? We know that my nose is itching, guys. I'm so sorry. And we know that in the story of Ruth, that Naomi is her mother-in-law. She lost her husband first, right? Then she lost her 2 sons, one of the sons which was married to Ruth, right? So Naomi decides that she's going to go back to her hometown, right? She tries to convince Ruth and her sister to stay in their hometown, get married again, all of this stuff, like start your life over, like just, I'm never going to be able to have a son that you're going to be able to marry. So, don't waste your time with me, right? Well, Ruth's sister, she decided to stay back, right? But Naomi's like, no, I'm going, right? We're down like 4 flats on a Cadillac, right? I'm going with you. So they travel, right? And we know that Ruth goes and she picks up grain in this man named Boaz's field, right? So that she can feed her and Naomi. And then we're going to start in chapter 3, right? Because in chapter 3, Naomi, which is Ruth's mother-in-law, right, told her, okay, one day, right? So just a little bit of backstory. Naomi is related to Boaz, right? We don't know exactly how, but she's related to Boaz, right? So it says, starting in chapter 3, verse 1, it says, the Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, maybe I should find a husband and a nice home for you. That would be good for you. Maybe Boaz is the right man. Boaz is a close relative. You worked with his women servants tonight. He will be working at the threshing floor. Now, we're going to go back to the threshing floor because I was like, what in the heck is that, right? Like, I'm from the country, but I don't know what that means. So it says, go wash and get dressed, right? And put on a nice dress and then go down to the threshing floor. Here we go again. But don't let Boaz see you until he has finished eating supper. After he eats, he will lie down to rest. Watch him so that you will know where he lies down. Go there, lift the cover off his feet. Remember that because it's going to be important. Lift the cover off of his feet. Then lie down there with Boaz. He will tell you what you should do about marriage. Then Ruth answered, I will do the thing that you say. So Ruth went down to the threshing floor. Ruth did everything that her mother-in-law told her to do. After eating and drinking, Boaz was very satisfied. Boaz went to lie down near the pile of grain. Then Ruth went to him very quietly, lifted the cover of his feet, and Ruth lay down at his feet. All right. This is so good. Okay. So I want you to know, okay, and you're thinking right now, this is like, oh, this is a love story, right? If we want to talk about it in today's time, right? Okay, you can I just be real? Let me just be really real right now, right? So in today's time, if somebody told us this, right? The world would be like, Naomi's pimping Ruth out, right? Like that's the real deal here, right? But in this is time, let me bring you back to something, okay? And here's what I want to, we know the backstory of Ruth. We know everything about her, okay? So let's just put this into perspective, right? Me, I was hurt. I was traumatized. I was abused. I was an addict. I was a convicted felon. Like all of these things, right? I thought that I was not good enough for God. Okay. I had done so many things wrong. There was no way that he was going to accept me. There was no way that I was his child anymore. There was absolutely no way. I had done too many things wrong. I had hurt too many people. I had gone too far until I heard a message of grace and mercy. Right? Right? It changed my perspective. Right? It changed my perspective that I could be accepted by God. I was good enough for God. But that at that point, it was up to me to do the work to get into an agreement and get into a relationship, get into intimacy with God, right? It was up to me to go to the threshing floor, right? And here's why I think this is so good. Because if you're reading this, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, whatever. It's a threshing floor, right? But if you dig into what this actually means, it's amazing. Okay. So a threshing floor is a place of separation and revelation. A place where the harvest was prepared for the separating the grain from the useless straw for the purpose of exposing and collecting the most valuable part of the crop. Did that just click with you? Because when I read that, I was like, wow. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to put it into perspective for our lives today. Okay. And in my life, how it worked in my life. Going to God. Okay. But let me tell you one more thing too. Okay. Listen, it says, when it says, go there and lift the cover off of his feet. Listen, you know what that means? Lifting the cover off of his feet, literally uncovering his legs. This showed Ruth was asking the man to be her protector or redeemer. When we decide to go to the threshing floor, okay? When we decide to go to God's feet, right? And ask him to be our protector and redeemer, right? It's like we're going to the threshing floor, okay? The threshing floor is the separating of the grain from the useless straw for the purpose of exposing and collecting the most valuable part of the crop. When we go to God and we say, right, we're ready to lift the cover, right? We go to our knees, right? We begin to pray. We begin to get into a relationship with God, okay? Uncovering of the feet shows that he's asking to be the protector and redeemer. When we go and ask God, God, please, I know I've done so many things wrong, and I know that I have not got the best track record, but, please, will you save me? Of course he's going to save you. Of course he is, right? But at that point, we go to the threshing floor, meaning going to the threshing floor is where we are going to get a separation, right? What I mean by separation is we are going to give those things to God, in which is useless, right? We're going to give those things to God that no longer serve us, right? in the current time that we are in. Not only so that we can be better, but so that we can be redeemed for the legacy in which God has created us to leave here on earth. It's so good. You're going to get it in a minute. What I mean by the separating, okay, going to the threshing floor, meaning we're going to go to God's feet, right? We're going to ask him, God, please be my protector and my redeemer. I know that I have done so many things wrong. I know I struggle with being courageous. I know I struggle with self-doubt. I know I struggle with depression. I know I struggle with addiction. I know I struggle with self-doubt. I know I struggle with relationships. I know I struggle, whatever it is that you're struggling with. I struggle with my trauma. I struggle with my past. I struggle with whatever it is. I struggle. Go to him. I struggle. At that point, when you uncover, okay, ready? When you lifting the cover off of his feet back in that time means basically Ruth was asking this man to marry her. Okay? So when we get into a marriage with God, right, we begin to uncover all of these things that no longer serve us, right? Because that's what the threshing floor is. It is the separating of the grain. Okay, grain, we're going to say grain is separating of the things that no longer serve us, right? That no longer serve our destiny, that no longer serve where we're trying to go in our life, no longer serve us in our marriages, no longer serve us in our relationships, no longer serve us in our business, no longer serve us in our mind, no longer serve us in our heart, no longer serve us in our body or our soul or whatever it is, those very things that no longer serve you anymore. Okay, so we're separating, right? We are separating from those things, those useless things, for the purpose of exposing and collecting the most valuable part. We have to separate all of those things that no longer serve us anymore to get to the most valuable part of who God has created us to be. Right? The hurt, the pain, the distrust, the insecurities, the self-doubt, the fear, right? All of these things that no longer serve you, right? So when you lift the cover off of these things, right, you begin to experience a sense of vulnerability, a sense of transparency, a sense of I'm going to trust you, Lord, in this process, right? Because we know that in the process of separating grain, right? So they're basically, I'll put it in terms that somebody might understand. Like if you go out and you weed your garden, okay? You are separating the weeds from the valuable plants, right? You're separating the weeds from your flowers because eventually the weeds will overtake the flowers if you don't. It's no different in our lives today. If we do not go to the threshing floor, right, to the feet of God, right, and uncover his feet and become transparent, right, and begin to separate ourselves from all the things in the past that are no longer serving us. Separate ourselves from the labels of society. Separate ourselves from those people who are talking about us. Separate ourselves from the lack of courage that we have. Separate ourselves from all of these things and begin to give them to God so that he, right, for the purpose of exposing and collecting the most valuable things, right? So when we go to the threshing floor, we are opening ourselves up to God and saying, God, I'm going to give you these things, right? I'm going to separate myself from the things that are useless for the purpose of getting the value in which you have given me in this life. You are valuable to God, right? We have to go to the threshing floor in order to receive the purpose, in order to receive the healing, in order to know what God is doing in our lives, right? I mean, I can only imagine what Ruth would have been called in today's time if this was a story that was brought to us today, right? She would have been called fast. She would have been called all these things, right? All these names because she was vulnerable in this moment, right? Because her mother-in-law, have you ever had somebody speak into your life and you blew it off? But even though in today's time, Naomi would have been labeled and so would have Ruth, right? But have you ever had somebody speak into your life? Have you ever had anybody prophesy in your life? Have you ever had anybody that's close to you that you know unconditionally loves you say, I am praying for you. Can I pray with you? Listen, when we go to the threshing floor and we begin to separate ourselves from the society labels, we begin to separate ourselves from those things of the past. When we begin to separate ourselves and decide that we are going to heal from the pain and the trauma and the hurt and all of these things in which has happened to us over our life, God will, when we lift the covers off, right? When we take the cover off, when we decide I'm going to open it up, I'm going to peel the curtains back, I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to be transparent, I'm going to be courageous, because God says if I go to the threshing floor, he can be my protector and my redeemer. Can I tell you that, of course, Ruth and Boaz ended up getting married, right? We see a woman who has gone through grief, who has gone through hurt, who has gone through pain, who was homeless, who had nothing, right? Who was picking up someone else's trash just so her and Naomi could eat. Do you know the guts and the courage and the risk that she was taking for her future? When she went to Boaz, peeled back the cover, when she went to the threshing floor, and he was there because the threshing floor, somebody would stay there because they didn't want anybody to steal their grain, right? So he was basically protecting his grain. He was protecting his livelihood, right? So when we decide to go to the threshing floor as Ruth did, right? Vulnerable. Like, can you imagine the vulnerability? Can you imagine how she was feeling when she was walking over there? Like, this guy could totally diss me. Like, this could be really bad, right? Like, could you imagine what she was going through? Probably the same thing that you go through every day in your mind. Is this going to work? Can I really heal from this? Can God really use me? Am I ever going to get past this? Is this financial struggle ever going to be over? Am I going to ever stop feeling this pain? Am I ever going to get past this trauma? Am I ever going to get a good job? Am I ever going to have a savings account? Am I ever going to be able to start a business? All of these things, can you imagine? Ruth was probably going through the exact same thing in her head as she was going over there. Like, I'm literally picking up grain in this man's field. Do you feel? Listen, I felt the same way when I met my husband, right? We were in two different places in our lives, right? I see this man that's fancy, right? Like wearing Gucci every day and like dressing so fancy, driving fancy cars. Here I am living in a halfway house, okay? And then basically a Section 8 building in downtown Dallas, okay? Once I got out of the halfway house, right? I'm wearing thrift store clothes, yoga pants, right? I wore the same pair of jeans a few days a week because I didn't have anything else, right? And prison boots because I didn't have any other shoes, right? So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm not good enough for this. Like this right here, this ain't gonna happen, right? So I can put myself in Ruth's shoes because I'm like, yeah, no, no, that's not right. I can't never add up to that standard, right? Like, I mean, this man's wearing Gucci and I'm wearing thrift store. Like, how does that even work, right? So it's we oftentimes look from things on the inside instead of what the purpose and the plan in which God has, right? We second guess ourselves because we see the outside. We second guess ourselves because we feel like we're as if we're not good enough, right? We second guess ourselves. But Ruth knew that there was a legacy inside of her, right? She knew that she had to take this risk. She had to have the courage. She had to have the faith. She had to have the belief because she knew that she had to do this for her legacy. She had to do this for her family. She had to do this because the future, this particular moment at the threshing floor would dictate the rest of her life. And even though people think you're crazy, society will talk about you, people will doubt you, they will laugh at you, they will call you names. You have to decide that this is the legacy. You're going to make the move. You're going to pull back, right? You're going to pull back the cover because your legacy depends on it. Your family's legacy depends on it. Can I tell you that you're going to leave a legacy regardless if it's good or bad? Can I tell you, once you're no longer here, you will be a conversation at Thanksgiving dinner. You will be a conversation at Christmas. You will be a conversation, but what conversation will you be? Yes, she left a legacy, a spiritual legacy. Yes, she left a legacy and showed us what going from nothing to something means. She left a legacy, or do you want to hear like, oh, yeah, she left a legacy, all right? Like, she did nothing with herself. She was miserable and depressed, and she complained every day, and she was negative. She could never get past that stuff from the past. She could never get past all the trauma. She could never get past the abuse. What type of legacy do you want to live? And I want to jump to the very end of the book of Ruth, okay? Because Ruth decided that she was going to go to the threshing floor, she was going to pull it back. She was going to decide that she was going to separate what no longer served her from what now was going to serve her. She made the decision that her life was going to change in that moment, right? Even though she probably felt really weird and second guessed herself and said, this man's over here wearing Gucci and I'm over here wearing thrift store yoga pants. Okay. Like this is the real thing. Right. And she's probably second guessing herself, but she made a decision in that moment that it didn't matter what anybody said about her. It didn't matter what was going on in the past, what was going to happen in the future, but she made a decision in that moment that she was going to pull it back, right? She's going to pull back the cover. She's going to be vulnerable and transparent, and she's going to deal with all the crap of the past, and she's going to go to God and say, God, can you please be my redeemer and my protector? Because I need you for my destiny. I need you for my vision. I need you for my legacy. And because she made that decision in that moment and she walked that walk of shame, I'm sure, because she was probably like, oh gosh, like I can only imagine. And so she walked the walk, right, of shame, and she did exactly what Naomi told her to do, because she knew that this was going to dictate the rest of her life. This was going to dictate her legacy. This was going to dictate the destiny in which God had placed on the inside of her, just like it does for you. Right? But here's the thing. So they did end up getting married, right? But it says, so Boaz married Ruth. the Lord allowed Ruth to become pregnant. So to me, this tells me that she was also not able to have children, right? Because the Lord allowed her to become pregnant. Because you would have thought, being married, right, in that time, that she would have already had children, right? Prior to her husband passing. Right? So, the Lord allowed Ruth to become pregnant, and she had a son. Okay? I'm going to jump down to the very last part. Okay? Where it says, Ruth and Boaz's family. I'm not going to read all of them because I can't even pronounce half the names, but here's what we're going to do. Boaz was the father of Obed. I can't even pronounce that. I'm not even going to lie. Obed was the father of Jesse. We all know who Jesse is, right? Like, everybody know who Jesse is? Jesse was the father of David. What I'm telling you today is that all the things that are no longer serving you, you got to let go of. You have to let go of it. You have to pull back the cover and decide today that you're going to be vulnerable and transparent. You're going to let go and give God all of the things that no longer serve you in your life, because you are redeemed, are being redeemed for legacy. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that a girl at the age of 10 years old was abused, hated herself for the next 25 years, became a mother, as a teenage mother, turned around and got to be an addict for 8 years, turned around, went to prison, turned around, got out, and here I am sitting here today? Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Who would have thought Ruth, who was a widow at a very young age, would have went to another town and went and allowed her mother-in-law to, I hate using the word, but pimped her out, okay, if we would talk about it in today's terms, right? And then she took the walk of shame over there and asked this man to marry her, and they didn't even know each other, other than she was picking up grain out of his field, because ultimately they came there homeless. They had nothing. She was a widow. In today's time, she would have been considered fast, or the other word, okay? Let's just be real. But she took the risk to be redeemed for her destiny, for her legacy. Today, it's time to go to the threshing floor. It's time to stop serving those things that no longer serve you. Okay? It's time to take your power back from those things that have been holding on to you and keeping you in bondage for 25 years. It's time to let go and let God begin to create the legacy in which He has placed you here to create. Do you think that in that walk from their house to the barn or the threshing floor, do you think that walk was like, okay, let's just, I'm going, here I go, yay, No. Can you imagine the thoughts that was going through this woman's head? I am a widow. I have nothing. I'm literally picking up behind somebody else's stuff, right? I am homeless. I have zero, nothing. This man's over here living high on the hog and owns all the land. Which brings me to another good point. She had nothing, right? She was picking up leftovers from this field and ended up being the owner of the field. Can I tell you today that God can take you from nothing to something in a matter of time if you're willing to go to the threshing floor, pull back the covers and say, here I am. Here I am. Do you know that there's a possibility that you've already given birth to a Jesse who will then be the father of a David? Because you decided to fight the giant of your past, to create a legacy for your family. And then guess what? You become the mom or the dad of a Jesse, and then ultimately the grandma or the grandpa of a David. Can I tell you that your family is depending on your legacy? What legacy are you going to leave? Are you going to decide today that you're going to pull it back and you're going to heal and you're going to stop allowing the past to dictate how you live every single day of your life? Are you ready to step into the purpose of exposing and collecting the most valuable parts of yourself? Or are you willing to stay stuck in the useless stuff that's no longer serving you? I feel like this is hardcore today, but I feel like this is so valid right now. Because mental health is such an issue in our world today. Suicide is such an issue in our life today. God has been taken out of so many things when he needs to be the center of all things. So today, I'm just asking you to make the choice to go to the threshing floor, which is a place of separation and revelation, separation from the things that are no longer serving you in your life, the separation from the hurt and the pain and the trauma and the labels, right? And all of the things that people have told you that you're going to be and spoke into your life that are absolutely not true. It's time to have that revelation. It's time to pull the cover back. It's time to say, here I am. I'm ready to separate from those things for the use and purpose of exposing the most valuable parts of myself so that I can be redeemed for the legacy in which God has placed me here to do. He's ready for you. He's been waiting for you. You've already been accepted. Your story's already been written in the book of life before you were even born. You're not here by mistake. You haven't done too much wrong. You can be the product of the grace and the mercy in which God has for you in this life, today, right now. So make the choice today to stop serving the things that no longer serve you. And begin to pray. Begin to separate yourself from those things so that the value in which God has placed inside of you can be exposed. So that you can begin to tell your story healed. So that you can begin to step into that purpose, into your power, and step out of bondage. God is ready for you because he has a job for you to do. He has other people that you are intended to heal. And your story is intended to touch. So today, go to that threshing floor. Get on your knees and pray to God and say, I'm ready to stop serving the things that are no longer serving me so that I can be redeemed for the legacy in which you have placed me here for. And I hope I added value today. If this touched your, excuse me, if this touched your life, please go ahead and share it to your social media or screenshot it, put it in your stories, tag me, whatever it is. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this morning. And I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.